Welcome to the Goodwood Show.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Goodwood Show, and today we have David from ICA. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure, and we live in the same city, right? It's quite funny that we never met before in any event. At least I think.
Yeah, we probably met, but there's always too many people, and it's hard to get to know everyone. We started kind of integrating ourselves in the Solana ecosystem just a few months ago, and it's such a big ecosystem with so many people. So we're still kind of finding our way around, but I'm glad that we connected, and the next event we'll definitely know each other.
Oh yeah, super team. As if they have the music a bit in the lower side, we may be able to connect because it tends to be a bit of a disco vibe for people to party and not much networking. But I love it. I love it. I love the super team events. So before we start, I know that you have a background in mathematics and philosophy. Kind of means that crypto was always in your destiny, right? Because it's kind of cryptography and this social aspect of crypto. So, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, first of all, math and philosophy are pretty much the same, like two sides of the same coin. It's essentially asking questions about the world without having a specific body of knowledge that you need to research. It's kind of open questions about the world, and it's just different ways of looking at the world, philosophy and math. So I think there's a lot, and a lot of famous philosophers and mathematicians were both philosophers and mathematicians.
They overlap, right?
Yeah, exactly. Descartes, Leibniz, Newton. There's a lot of examples, and I think I think it's crypto was always fascinating to me since the very beginning, and it was a pretty cool journey that got us, myself and my co-founders, from Web 2 into crypto, and yeah, I'm excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, and it's funny because you have co-founded so many projects, right? And on kind of the Web 2 side of it. And was Web 2 too slow for you? And you wanted like the proper hype of NFT?
No, I think it's funny because it's when you're in Web 2, you don't say, "Oh, I'm in Web 2," right? You say, "I'm in cybersecurity," or "I'm in AI," or you're not in Web 2, right? Web 2 is just everything. And here in crypto, everyone is like, "Oh, how is it in Web 2?" So I think it's not that it was too slow. I think it was just the ambition to change the world, which is, I think, something that every founder has, is something that you really you need to be in the right place in the right time. So I think if you were in Web 2, right, or in the internet, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, then you were changing the world. But now I think it's become much more mature. And if you want to change the world, you need to be on the frontier, which is crypto or AI or the things that are currently changing the world. And I think if you're looking at the impact that things can have on the world and what role you can play in those things, I think crypto is, even more than AI today, the premium place to leave your mark and to change the world. So I think that's how I see it. It's more about this is the place to be if you want to really make an impact.
It's nice that you are so bullish about crypto. We are not on a very good moment, right, for the markets. And did you feel it as a big company? And I know that you have backing institutions behind you, right, big ones, and probably investments. Do you feel the difference between the bear and the bull, or?
Yeah, you can never separate the market, but I also think that at the end of the day, you need to zoom out and to realize where we are in the grand scheme of things, and the markets will always go up and down. And when the markets crashed in 2008, or just at the beginning of COVID, it's not like people are like, oh, okay, now Google is over, right? Like it's Google is still Google, and the markets can be bad and things can go down, but it doesn't mean that if you're doing something meaningful that has a potential to change the world and to have an impact, that changes because the markets, the macro is going up or down. It does affect a lot things like capital and being able to fundraise, but yeah, I wouldn't go as far as to say that it has a crazy impact on the macro side of things.
Okay, and my question before we actually start talking about the projects that you have, and you're going to want to talk about them and explain them. Are you migrating to Solana, or is an expansion? And then my question is, because you say you're bridgeless capital markets, right? So if it's bridgeless, does it matter which chain you are? If you can manipulate in all chains, in all assets, right?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I think the way to think about it is, first of all, there's two projects, right? So there's ICA and there's Encrypt. ICA is a project that we launched on Sui, and we're now expanding to Solana. And Encrypt is a project that we will directly be launching on Solana, and also uses ICA under the hood. I think the way to think about it is you have what ICA enables, and ICA enables controlling assets on any chain, right? It is bridgeless. It completely removes the barrier. But then where do you create that control layer? That's the question. And that is something where we coupled ICA to. So when we started, we coupled it with Sui, and now we're coupling it with Solana. So you will be able from Solana to control any asset on any chain, but you won't be able to do that from Ethereum, for example, because ICA doesn't natively coordinate or is not enabled as a primitive for developers on Ethereum. It's only enabled as a primitive for developers on Solana.
And in this case, why Solana? It's obvious for me because I'm a Solana maxi, but it's nice to hear from someone else.
So I mean, I think there's a lot of different answers to that question, obviously, and you can talk about the speed and about the ecosystem and the users and everything. But I think for us, the number one reason was that today Solana is the number one developer platform in crypto, and possibly the number one developer platform in the world, like not just in crypto. And for us, we're creating like very low level developer infrastructure. So for us, we have to be in a place where there's a lot of developers, and in Solana, it's not just a lot of developers. The ecosystem is so vibrant and is so developer focused, right? We just saw Colosseum, which was such an amazing feat with so many developers from all over the world. And you have this energy, you have super teams, right? You have like all these things. Solana is just built as an ecosystem, as a culture to foster and to push developers. And you can see that in the results. There's nothing like this in crypto, and I think also outside of crypto. So for us, that was, putting everything else aside, that was the number one factor for us, where we were looking at everything that's happening in crypto. And you mentioned the market. The market affects other ecosystems so badly, and in Solana, it's like it doesn't matter. There's always more and more developers. So yeah, that for us was just the number one factor of choosing Solana. And we can talk about a lot of other amazing things that Solana has to offer. When we started working on ICA, that was 4 years ago. So Solana was at a very, very different place, and in general, crypto was in a very different place. And when we started, we looked at the available options, and none of them seemed that great. You had like Cosmos and Polkadot or EVM or Solana, or like those kind of were the options, and we weren't really impressed with what was available then. But we also knew we had a lot of cryptography research work to do before we can even think about launching anything. So we kind of put that aside and worked on the cryptography. And then when we came back, a lot has progressed. And the reason why we initially chose Sui is because they really push the kind of the limits of what was possible. And I think Solana in the past few months, and we're going to see it in the next few upgrades with Alpenglow coming, and also the upgrades that we're just seeing of reducing block time, and Solana has kind of put themselves at probably the top of any type of performance. And if you compare, you can compare it to networks that are much less decentralized and still don't have the level of performance that Solana is going to have after Alpenglow, for example. So I think Solana did it the hard way and the right way, where it started as like, let's just put something out there. It's not going to work great. There's all these jokes about outages and Solana, being down and all that. But it was able to, you always say in startups, if you're happy with what you launched, it means you launched too late, right? So I think launching something that is out there, creating product market fit, creating the right culture, the right ecosystem around it, put Solana in a position where now that it can catch up, on the tech front and be at the forefront and be like, really the top performing chain. It also has, all the culture and all the product market fit and everything that it had because it launched kind of quick and dirty and, put something out there. So I think there's so many good things to say about Solana and where it is right now. And we're very excited to become part of the Solana family.
I want to dive now into like what is the problem you are kind of solving, right, with ICA, because like 2 billion have been stolen or hacked with bridges like Ronin, Wormhole, Nomad. Like there's so many, right? And can you explain like why the bridges don't work, and in this case, what you're gonna give as an alternative to that?
Yeah. So I think it's not just bridges, by the way. It's also any type of centralized custody. So you have centralized exchanges, right? The biggest hack in the history of crypto, 1.5 billion, was because of Bybit, because of a centralized custodian that pooled users' assets and then got exploited. And the same logic happens with a bridge, right? The moment you have someone who takes a lot of users' assets, pools it in one place, it becomes a honeypot. It becomes a single point of failure that attackers know if they are able to hack it, they don't need to hack into the millions of users of Bybit. They can hack one address, a few individuals, and steal all of those users' assets together, right? So, and the same goes with a bridge, right? All the users of a bridge deposit their assets in the bridge, and then they get the wrapped IOU token. But all of these assets are held by the bridge and become a honeypot for attackers to exploit it. And this is the exact problem that crypto was born to solve, right? Crypto was born to solve relying on third parties, relying on trusted intermediaries. And the big issue, there are two big things that we haven't been able to solve yet, and this is why we built ICA, which is custody and interoperability. And both of those things, because we haven't been able to solve them in a satisfactory way with a good enough user experience, they tend to fall back into trusted
the standard, right?
Yeah, and then we kind of lose the whole concept of the reason we're doing crypto in the first place. And then also you see hacks and you see all these things. So if you're gonna have a centralized intermediary, you might as well not have this blockchain, immutable blockchain that no one can reverse, right? Because if someone breaks into the bank account and changes stuff, the bank account can just revert, or the bank can just revert the transaction, right? So that's a better model if you're trusting someone. If you have a model that's built on zero trust, but then you trust someone, you have the worst of both worlds, right? You create a honeypot and you can't prevent, you can't revert an attack if it happens. So, and the reason we're doing that is because self-custody is super, super hard. Even for power users, it's almost impossible. If you lose your key, if the key gets hacked, you lose access to your assets. It's something very unreasonable from a
Imagine
user.
then I just have all money in one key, or like it would be like insane, right?
I mean, no one in the world, institutions or companies or individuals, no one in the world can really fully embrace self-custody with a clear conscience and, just sleep and be okay at night, right? It's something that even power users, and we see these stories all the time of a power user getting hacked or losing their key, or, the guy who has this Bitcoin in a dumpster somewhere, it's like these things that happen all the time. So this is not feasible, and that's why we fall back into centralized exchanges, centralized custodian, right? People want that assurance. So that's one. And the other part is interoperability. And interoperability is more of a technical problem. You have these blockchains, and each blockchain is its own zone of sovereignty that has zero trust guarantees, where you don't have to trust anyone, not even the operators, the nodes, or the miners, the validators. And then when you need to do something between two systems like that, you have to rely on someone to tell you what is happening in the other system. So you don't have these, and Ethereum tried to have this thing with L1s and L2s, but that causes a lot of other issues, right, with fragmentation and security in general. So you don't really have a solution to how to do interoperability without, going back and reverting to trusted intermediaries. So this was kind of the big problem, and we've been personally into crypto for a long time, but we struggled to find a problem we really want to solve, and is a big enough problem for us to want to solve, until we kind of came up with a solution to this problem, and we call it zero trust custody, or zero trust interoperability. But building cryptography that can actually solve that problem from first principles was a really interesting and big problem for us to solve, because we believe this is the key for mass adoption of crypto without having to sacrifice, the basic principles that crypto is built on.
And then you say zero trust, but that I think from what I understand, that no one can steal your tokens and stuff. But how is that different from like a multi-sig or some other type of protocol or software?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the way to think about it, or the way to understand it, is through this new primitive, this new concept that we created with Ika, and that is called a D-wallet. So like you have the app or DApp, it's a D-wallet, a decentralized wallet. And a D-wallet is essentially, it's not a wallet interface. It's not like a user application. It's a building block. It's a primitive for developers. And what developers can do with a D-wallet is they can control assets. You can think about it like a signing mechanism. You can sign transactions to other chains, so you can control assets on those chains. But the signature is generated cryptographically by both the user, the end user, and the Ika network. So Ika network, you can think about it like a policy layer of whether or not the signature is signed, but it's not enough by itself. You also need the user cryptographically to participate. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to create a much more flexible system for self-custody or for interoperability, because you can now enforce logic on any asset in terms of custody, and on any asset in terms of interoperable logic. And that logic will live on Solana, right? It will be enforced through Ika, but you never ever take the user's autonomy, and you never take the user's sovereignty away from them. And because you have these two parts, you can play with it in a way that you can't play with a private key. So I'll give you a small example just to demonstrate. So a D-wallet cryptographically, it consists of two, it's called secret shares. So it's a cryptographic process where you don't have a private key generating a signature. You have multiple different shares. And with the D-wallet, it's two shares. So there's the user share that's held by the user, and there's the network share that is operated with a threshold protocol through the Ika network.
Okay.
And so let's take the simplest example, right? Let's say I want to have a wallet with a policy that I can only spend $100 a day, right? And if I want to spend more than $100 a day, I need to do a bunch of things and authenticate with a bunch of different things to make sure that it's actually me. And that's how I can protect myself if I ever lose access to whatever I want to withdraw money with. Then it can only maybe withdraw $100 a day, and then I'll notice it. I'll be able to, right? So let's say I want that method of withdrawing $100 a day to be on my computer, right? I use it to do like microtransactions for my computer, and I want it to be there. If I have my private key on my computer, if my computer gets, I get social engineered, someone hacks it, whatever happens, right? That's it. It's over, right? All of my account is gone. But if I only have the user share on my computer and I have an authorization policy through the network share, on Solana, that it can only withdraw $100 a day, then even if someone hacks my computer, the maximum they can do is get $100, right? If they try to sign anything that's over $100, they won't have the signature completed. So now the user share in itself becomes not super sensitive, right? It's not as sensitive as a private key because it doesn't give you full authority. And then you can expand. This is a very, very reductive kind of simple example, but you can expand that, and now you can understand how you can now implement this user share in a way that's, like with a passkey or with social login or even an email and password, right? Like things that people are used to, like a regular login, like a Web2 experience. And you know that even if it gets compromised, you have all these fail-safe mechanisms to make sure that, nothing catastrophic happens, right? You might be hit a bit or whatever. You can create whatever policy you want. But at the end of the day, it's not as sensitive as a full key, a full private key. And so that's kind of how you can think about it in a way that you still keep the user sovereignty, right? If someone is able to hack the Solana smart contract or to hack ICA, they still can't do anything because they have to have the user participation cryptographically. It's not possible without it. And so then if you think about it from, you compared it to bridges, if you have an interoperability protocol on Solana that says, for example, I allow users to swap between, assets on different chains. Instead of taking, Zcash, putting it in a pool, then giving you a wrapped Zcash on Solana and saying how you can trade Zcash on Solana. And now what happens if someone hacks, the pool of Zcash? Now your wrapped Zcash on Solana is worth 0, right? Instead of doing that, what you can do is you can say, no, you actually hold Zcash on Zcash. You control it from Solana, but it's held on Zcash. And if you want to trade it with Sol, then you do the trade, but the trade is Zcash stays on Zcash and Sol stays on Solana. Every asset stays on their chain. There's no pools, and every asset is always controlled by an individual user. And if someone wants to hack it, they need to hack that individual user. They can't just hack a protocol and steal everyone's money. So that's kind of, a very, very high level of how this is solved through cryptography. And we had to do a lot of research and create the cryptography to enable that. But that's how we solve it.
Okay, that sounds interesting. At least I'm not that technical. Of course, I've tried bridges. I have tried all sorts of protocols, and I know how difficult it is to solve this problem that you try. That actually two of them, right? The two main ones. So it's funny because you didn't try to solve only the one that is key. You go for two of them, right?
So actually we went for 3 because the third one is privacy, and that's why we did Encrypt.
Okay. So it's perfect.
Yeah.
But at the moment you are only on Devnet, right?
So yeah, right now ICA is live, but right now it's still only available on Sui, and it will be available soon on Solana mainnet. Right now it's available on Devnet, so developers on Solana can start building with both ICA and Encrypt. We've actually had quite a few builders use ICA and Encrypt during Colosseum. We actually had a space today with a project called Heirloom. I don't know if you heard about them. They do the like proof of life heartbeat. So you basically send, you need to send like once a month or once 2 months, you send like a heartbeat transaction. And if you don't send it, then your entire assets move over, are transferred to your next of kin, right? So it's kind of like a inheritance protocol. But with ICA now they can do it with any asset on any chain. So they can just transfer, all of your holdings, including your Bitcoin and your Zcash and everything. Just transfer everything to your next of kin, which is pretty cool. So that we had a space with them today, but there are a lot of Solana builders that are actively building with ICA, and they're going to be ready day one when we launch on mainnet Solana, which will be very soon.
Okay, I hope that is soon, not like Fire Dancer and Alpenglow. Like we were talking about that. We have a validator, so we keep waiting for the Alpenglow. That's gonna help a lot, so it never comes. I hope it's soon. And you actually mentioned like the ICA network, right? So it's ICA also like a client, like Jito. In the background, it needs nodes, it needs the validators. It works directly with the validators, or doesn't need any of that.
So ICA has, it is a permissionless network. It's a permissionless proof of stake network. You can become an ICA operator by staking ICA, but it's not a smart contract network. So it's not like Solana, like an L1. All ICA does is generate signatures. So it's what is called an MPC network. So MPC is a way to generate a signature with multiple parties, a multi-party computation, instead of having one private key. So every node on ICA basically holds a secret share, and together a threshold of 2/3. Right now, there's about 70 operators, and 2/3 of them together can generate their part of the signature. The user is, of course, also required to complete the signature, but on the ICA part, it's 2/3 of a permissionless decentralized network. So that's kind of how ICA is designed. It is a bit confusing sometimes for people who are very used to like L1s. And where is it an L2 on Solana? So it's
exactly
not
that's what the question.
It's kind of you can think about it like a specialized network that is designed to do a very specific thing, and it's designed to do it in a way that is hyper optimized, just for that specific use case. So similar to maybe like an app chain, but it's not like an end user app. It's maybe the closest thing that people are familiar with is like a decentralized storage network, right? You have something like Filecoin. You can use Filecoin on Solana, right? You can store data on Filecoin, and actually a lot of Solana operators do that for like the historical data of the chain is stored on Filecoin. And that has like its own decentralized network. There's also Chainlink, for example, its own decentralized network of oracles that only do Oracle work. So this is the same thing, just for signatures.
Yeah, specialized.
And Encrypt is also a decentralized network specifically for FHE, for fully homomorphic encryption, for providing privacy.
And it's funny because you say all of this, and like it's kind of too good to be true, right? We have been having so many issues. It's like if ICA is as you described, what becomes possible in like 2-3 years that we didn't even think about, or I don't know. What is your perspective, long term?
So my perspective is that actually the most exciting thing that becomes possible is actually the most boring thing, which is crypto becomes invisible. So the thing that we haven't been able to figure out as crypto until today is how does it become invisible rails for everything in the world without completely sacrificing all of the fundamental principles of crypto, right? So you see there are a lot of approaches that are trying to make crypto more invisible, but they are giving up self-custody and they're sacrificing the zero trust aspect. So you can see things like Privy, you can see things like actually everything somehow connects to Stripe, right? So Stripe acquired Privy, and now Stripe is launching Tempo, right? And it's like all these things that reduce decentralization and eliminate self-custody and all these things that crypto is built on, because they do want to create a good user experience that's invisible. But again, you can't have it both ways. If you're reintroducing trust, then you're losing the biggest value of crypto. The biggest value of crypto is you can take all of the crazy overhead that trust creates, which is trillions of dollars every year that the economy pays for trusted intermediaries and banks and courts and regulators. You can take all of that and you can save it, right? Like that's the biggest value of crypto. So the most exciting thing is we can actually start delivering that value, right? We can actually replace existing systems, and users won't have to, change their behavior. They won't have to, take additional risks. They won't have to become ideological and into crypto. They'll just use it and they won't even know that they're using it, right? Like that's the most exciting thing, which is very boring, right? But it is the most exciting thing that can happen to crypto, because we can start winning. We can start actually changing the world, and not being that niche that has the potential to maybe someday become something.
You kind of killing the maxi vibe, because no one will gonna.
That's the maxi dream come true, right? Like the maxi dream is this actually becomes the world. Like every person in the world gets access to self-sovereign, unstoppable financial rails, and they don't even need to change anything about what they do. Like that's amazing.
There's something new happening on Solana, and you can hear it. Soul Radio is a 24/7 radio stream and original tracks only. No copies, no noise, just real vibes from the ecosystem. If you're part of the space, you need to hear this. Discover Soul Radio now at solradio.fun.
My question is also now about like your competition, and right, because there's already quite a few projects like LayerZero, Axelar, and like Wormhole. Like they may be bridges, they may be LayerZeros. Are they competitors, or they are solving different problems? What is your view, and then what are the main challenges?
So I think that there are a lot of competitors that I would say compete with things that can be built with ICA in a better way, right? Okay. So you can build, for example, why do you have LayerZero or Wormhole, right? You have it because you want to, for example, trade assets between different chains, right? So the way that they solve it is they're like, okay, let's lock the asset here, let's give you a wrapped asset there, and then you can trade it. But you can build a better version of that to solve the multi-chain trading problem. You can solve that on ICA in a better way. So you can build solutions on ICA that will be competitors to these, let's call it legacy solutions like bridges. But it's not just bridges, right? It's also, because I mentioned Privy, right? I think Privy has been very successful in finding product market fit because they solve a real problem, right? Of custody user experience. But they solve it in a way that sacrifices self-custody, right? And that introduces them as a trusted intermediary, a centralized intermediary that is a single point of failure. And that is not something that will work in the long term. So I think a competitor to Privy that solves the exact same problem, but in a better way, without sacrificing self-custody, can be built, and actually is being built right now on ICA, right? So these are I don't see them as direct competitors to ICA, but I see the potential for people to build the next generation of these solutions that will compete with them, obviously. And there's going to be a transition period, right? Because these things, it's never overnight. But eventually, it's not a coincidence that, no protocol wants to get hacked, right? And no bridge wants to get hacked. But they get hacked, and they get hacked over and over. And even the big ones get hacked. And it happens because attackers only need to succeed once, right? As a defender, you always need to be 100%. An attacker only needs to be right once. And the moment something can be hacked, then eventually, over a long enough period of time, it will be hacked. And so you have to assume, I come from cybersecurity, and our team, we all come from cybersecurity. You have to assume when you're building a system that the parameters you're building, all the defenses, you have to assume they will be broken, right? And then you need to minimize the damage as much as possible of what happens after it gets broken. And I think this is kind of the big reason why, in the long term, ICA will replace all these things, because it introduces this very powerful mechanism of zero trust that crypto is built on, that says, even if you break the system, you still can't, harm a specific user, because you need to compromise every single user individually. And so, I think that's why the solutions that will be built on ICA are inevitably will replace all the solutions that do introduce that risk back into crypto.
And from your philosophy background, do you actually think that the common user actually care about decentralization?
No, I mean, I think, by the way, I don't think they should care, right? I think users, they care about the value, the end value of what they're getting, right? So users want to get a good product at the least, the cheapest price, right? That's what users care about.
The least friction.
And I think crypto,
right?
Yeah, the best. That's part of the best product, is right. The best user experience,
yeah.
the best everything at the cheapest price, right? And then there's different trade-offs, right? Okay, I might take some, of a great experience, but I will, pay less, or I'll pay more for a better user, right? There's all, and then like people compete, different products compete on these like trade-offs, right? But that's what users want. Users don't care about the tech. Like when you use the internet, when you use X, do you care about what data center they're using, what protocol they're using for communicating? Like, you don't care about any of that, and you shouldn't care about any of that. So this is what I said about crypto getting boring, right? Like crypto has to get boring in order to become invisible rails. And because crypto is better at doing things without trust, it can reduce the cost, and that cost ends up being reflected for the end user. So at the end of the day, solution products that choose crypto as rails will have, will be able to offer the product at a cheaper cost, and that's what the user cares about. So at the end of the day, right, everything we have, if we're talking about risk, cybersecurity, that is factored into the price, right? So if you build something in crypto that has a higher risk, then that will be factored into the price of the end user, right? Whether it's through insurance or through whatever it is, right? So at the end of the day, the way to win, the way to become invisible rails, the way to get into the hands of end users without them caring about decentralization or security or any of that stuff, is to remove trust and to become cheaper, right? Like that's how we win.
Yeah, makes sense. And did you think that is your target audience will be more on institutions, or even the small developer gonna start using ICA from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, targeting institutions right now, where we are in crypto, it's not a good strategy as a go-to-market. And the reason is because crypto is such a frontier tech. Institutions have no idea what any of this means, right? And what they want is they want to see something that's working on a large scale. Yeah, and people, when they see something, why are institutions interested in Solana? A lot of people in crypto are very perplexed, right? They're like, Solana is like the degen chain and the crying chain, and suddenly all these institutions are interested. Like, what the fuck? How does this make sense? And because people in crypto like tell themselves all these stories about institutions and what they care about, the only thing institutions care about is to see something that is battle tested and actually works on a large scale, in the real world. That's all they care about, and that's why Solana is so prominent with institutions, is because they proved that they work on the largest scale. Like there's nothing that it gets even close to the scale that Solana was used in the past few years. So this is why Solana is interesting. And so when you want to, and I do believe ICA and Encrypt, right? All of these primitives are very, very relevant for institutions. But I think the way to win is to launch on Solana, to get as many developers on Solana to utilize the tech, to get all their users use it, to make it battle tested. And then institutions will look at that and will say, oh, this is good. I want this, right? And then there'll be the institutional version of whatever it is built on top of ICA and Encrypt.
Makes sense. You've been mentioning Encrypt. What is the difference? And if you can explain more Encrypt.
Sure. So with ICA, we said it's the network that enables D-wallets and signatures and controlling assets on other chains, so you can solve custody and interoperability. Encrypt solves what we believe is the third, unsolved problem in crypto today, which is privacy. And we actually believe that if you are able to solve custody, interoperability, and privacy, then that's it. You can make, because Solana solved, speed and scale, and all those things are already solved. Those are the three things that you have left to solve in order for crypto to become these invisible rails for everything. So privacy is a very, very, very complicated problem, and the reason is, a lot of the way that blockchain works is by being public. Like, this is how you create a lot of these guarantees, is by being public, and being able to keep those guarantees in place and not, again, introducing some trusted intermediary and introducing privacy is a very, very, very complicated cryptographic problem. And until today, there were two approaches. One approach is, as usual, let's reintroduce some trusted intermediary, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's take a TEE, a trusted execution environment, special piece of hardware, and we'll run stuff on there, and then you trust whoever is running it that they're, it's not compromised, and you're trusting them to be honest, and it's very centralized because it's one machine, right? So there's a lot of trust involved, but then, technically, if they are honest, then they can't really see what's going on, and then you have privacy, right? So that's one way of solving it, which, as we said, is not ideal. And then the other solution is ZK, right? ZK got a lot of attention, zero knowledge proofs, and you can cryptographically create a lot of privacy features around your state as an individual single user. So you can, for example, hide your balance, and you could prove that you have the balance, but you don't have to show it. You can hide the transfer, like a peer-to-peer transfer, right? And we see really cool projects like Zcash built on top of that tech. But if we want to really introduce privacy into everything we're doing on the blockchain, that's a much, much harder problem.
Yeah.
ZK isn't enough for that. So you need to find a better way of doing that. And what is considered to be the holy grail of cryptography is FHE, is fully homomorphic encryption. And the reason it's considered the holy grail is because you can actually run any computation that you want over encrypted data without having to decrypt it, which gives you the absolute privacy that you can have without any restrictions on what the use case is. So you can potentially encrypt all of Solana, and it will still work exactly as expected, which is a pretty great vision. Encrypt is an FHE network, so it is built on FHE research that we did, actually as part of our research for ICA. But we achieved some pretty meaningful breakthroughs in the field of FHE. And FHE, the biggest problem with FHE until today was it wasn't practical. So the performance had a lot of overhead. It was very complicated. And even with very, very strong machines, you still you can't get to satisfactory performance. And so we had quite a few breakthroughs on research in FHE that, for the first time, actually enabled FHE to be practical and to actually perform. Obviously there's always going to be overhead, but the overhead was manageable. And you can actually now think about things like DeFi on Solana that run, obviously not at like top Solana speed, but still in a speed that is acceptable for a user, but completely private. So nothing has to be exposed. And then you can solve a lot of problems, not just MEV, right? Things like that, but also in general, being able to do things that you always did off the market in kind of shade, like, you had like OTC deals and all these things that people did outside of the real market. You can have everything on the market in a way that is the maximum efficiency, but also preserving privacy. And yeah, I think this is a very big deal of enabling basically any Solana program to be fully encrypted or have some of it data encrypted in a way that doesn't really harm the performance too much.
Yeah, and this kind of narrative recently, right? Since Zcash went so in terms of price. I'm not sure in terms of usability. I actually never used it. Sorry.
Actually, there is an increase of usage as well in Zcash. I mean, it's obviously tied to price action, but Zcash is a store of value. So store of value is a lot about the price, right? That's kind of the main parameter. It's not, there's no smart contracts, there's no DeFi, there's no other things to measure there. And Zcash have been doing a really good job for a very long time. They've been building, diligently. They're like the type of builders that actually, change things over a long period of time, have a vision, change things. I'm very excited about Zcash. I think besides having a good private store value, you also need to have, a good private smart contract network. This is something that we have, and our mission is to make Solana that network.
Okay. I'll be excited about Zcash when they migrate to Solana. I wanted to ask you actually, because this is a common narrative nowadays. So privacy also, some people like on governments and stuff, right? They see, okay, now there's privacy, so this will bring more criminal activity, and so will be a lot of people like trying to investigate this. So do you fear that will bring attention to this kind of situation from the higher government institutions?
So I think so. There's a few parts to my answer. So the first part is privacy is a basic human right, right?
Yeah.
When you look at any basic human right, it can be abused for bad things, but that doesn't mean that you should limit it, right? So if you look at the internet, right, the internet is used to do pretty horrible things in the world.
Yeah.
Probably some of the most horrible things in the world are being done using the internet. But that doesn't mean that we should censor the internet, that we should stop the internet, right? It's just part of the world. Like, the world has horrible people, and horrible people will do horrible things with wonderful, amazing things that we invented and we put in there. So this is kind of the very high level answer: is privacy is a basic human right, and we should have it regardless of how a bad actor would use privacy, right? But now if we go into how do we actually deal with those things, I think there's, at the end of the day, technology is a tool, and then we have social systems built around technology. And the answer is always in the social systems and never in the tool, right? When you want to solve a social problem, you need to create a social mechanism around how you're solving it as a society. And I think privacy is going to be very nuanced. And by the way, we're also building Encrypt with that in mind. So with Encrypt, we will have a permissionless decentralized network. We're actually going to be the first permissionless decentralized network that can scale to a very large, like, we solve a lot of problems in the cryptography that allows us to do that. So you will have this kind of, let's call it unstoppable privacy that is very decentralized. But we will also enable, we call it FHE clusters. So if you're an institution or a company, you can create your own FHE cluster that works on top of Solana the same way as Encrypt does. But you have more control over, decrypting the data. So, for example, if a regulator comes and wants to see the data, then you can have a contractual relationship with the operators of the cluster, and you can do that. So you can think about it like a small permissioned version of Encrypt that can be run by specific applications. And then you will have different applications that each chooses. The key word here is choice. You need to have the choice.
Okay.
Right? So you need to have the choice of using things that are unstoppable and no one can, break your privacy. And you can have a choice to, submit into this system where there are, scenarios where someone will maybe have access to the data under certain conditions, right? And then each user will have the choice of what they use, and they will have the choice of moving between those things if they're not happy with them. And I think this is how, as a society, we deal with those things, right? For example, if a certain market, right, or a certain society wants to make sure that specific activities can be, decrypted, let's say, right, at a certain time, if the needs arise, then they can say, okay, if you don't choose to use these systems, then you won't be able to have access to that. And if you do, then you can, right? Like, and so at the end of the day, we need to have the technology to have all of the different choices out there for people to choose from. And then we need to create the social systems in order to be able to, track bad actors and mitigate bad behavior. But those things can't be embedded into the tech, right? Like surveillance that is embedded into technology is bad, right? The technology needs to enable everything, and then you as a user can have a choice, and you can choose not to, to live completely off the grid and not to be part of any government in any country in the middle of the ocean or whatever, right? If you want, you should have that option. But if you want to, enjoy sewage and, whatever the council, then you pay council tax, right? This is kind of how we live in the world. So I think this is how I see privacy and bad actors.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. And then to add another layer of complexity to this, we have AI now, right? That's a big narrative, and I know that you build stuff, projects and companies also on AI before. How do you see the world now, like with AI? Like, would our finances be managed and our trading be solo done by AI bots in some future?
So I think it's funny, but I was involved in AI for many years, and I actually think AI is it's not fundamentally different from other transformative technologies that we've had, right? And I think when computers started, right, and today we're looking at like early computers, and it looks like a piece of trash to us, right?
Yeah.
When early computers started, people were like, okay, no one is going to have a job anymore. Like, that's it. It's over, right?
I remember that.
We had the same thing with factories before computers, right?
Yeah.
Now you look at a factory, you're like, that's low tech. That's not even high tech. But when factories started, everyone was like, okay, that's it. It's over. We're not gonna have humans anymore. You don't need them. It's just gonna be machines, right? So I think we kind of have, as humanity, we're very hysterical, and we kind of have this moment
dramatic.
There's this new tech that makes things better and more efficient, and we're like, okay, it's over. That's it. It's going to take over. But at the end of the day, it is. A lot of people like to call it a much better keyboard, right? It kind of it enables you to reach a level of productivity that you couldn't have before. But it is a tool at the end of the day. And as a tool, it will increase our productivity. So, people say, oh, now one person can do the work of 5 people, right? Or 20 people. That's great. That means that now 20 people will be able to do the work of 400 people, right? We just have 20x productivity. It's not like, oh, now, 95% of the world have nothing to do. No, we'll just have more productivity, and we'll be able to advance humanity even further. So, as far as I see it, AI, and again, as a tool, of course, it can be used for bad things as well. And we've seen a lot of an increase in the amount of hacks, not just in crypto in general, that is powered by AI. But this is how it works. This is how transformative technology works. And as humanity, we always are able to adapt and to make that the new normal. And then the next thing will come that will cause us to lose our shit and say everything is over,
Yeah, that is how this. But you see a world where finance will be kind of on a layer of AI.
Yeah, of course. Just like today, finance is on computers, right? Finance runs on computers, and 100 years ago, it didn't. And so, of course, finance will run. I mean, AI still has a long way to go until that happens. But yeah, I think it will happen, and I think hopefully crypto will happen even before. And finance will run on decentralized rails with a lot of AI involved. And I think, again, like, AI is not separate, than to computing, right? It's just like a better version of computing. So yeah, 100%. I think once AI is ready, then a lot of things will work more on AI rails.
And do you think that we're gonna shift again from the AI meta and hype that we have now to the crypto again and NFTs and a cycle? Or
so I'm not a kind of trading or markets guy. I think I'm more of I have like a very long-term like macro thesis, right? And I think the value proposition of crypto is saving the world trillions of dollars. That it's not even it's not a technological barrier, right? It's all these social trust systems that we built and cost so much money and create so much overhead, we won't need them anymore, right?
Yeah.
So that's the value proposition of crypto, which is why crypto will succeed, right? So in the long term, and it can take a few years and it can take a few decades, right? But at the end of the day, crypto will replace the existing system, just because it doesn't make sense to pay trillions of dollars, right? If you can save that. So that will happen. How will that translate into a market and a trend and metas, and these things are unpredictable, so it's hard to say. But what I am very certain is, if you're a serious builder and you're building something significant and you have the patience and the tenacity to stick around through thick and thin until this vision is materialized, then you will win in crypto.
Okay, I think this is the title of the episode for sure. Is anything that you want to, as a final message, want to share, or anything that I forgot to ask that you think that is important to mention?
No, I think for us, the most important message is to builders. I think that builders, it's very hard, especially in a market like today where it's hard to get funding. It's very hard to kind of figure out where to focus. So I would say, come to Solana, first of all. Take a look at the new technologies that we're introducing with ICA and Encrypt. Figure out what would be like a category-changing, product, something that can be the next generation of something that you already know is very successful and has a lot of demand. Solve a real problem and then stick to it, right? Like, just build it, get more users, don't give up just because, markets go up and down. It's very tough. I can tell you as a founder that has a live token, it's very, very tough to clear the noise and kind of, focus on the work and the long-term vision. But that's the only way to win, right? Like, if you look at all of the successful teams in crypto, there's no like overnight success. And, like, all of these people have worked on something for a long time with a vision. They didn't budge, no matter the market went upwards, downwards, whatever, right? Like, and you can see these are the teams that make it. These are the teams that push through and eventually become big, and people look at the result and they're like, oh, I want to be there. But it happens because you stick around and because you think forward and you identify, okay, this is where the world is going. This is where the market is going. This is what I'm going to build for. So yeah, if this is the message, if you are interested in ICA or in Encrypt, if you want to disrupt custody or interoperability or privacy, then please reach out. And we're working with a lot of builders in the Solana ecosystem to build this new generation of products, and we're very excited about the future.
No, perfect. Thank you, David. I'm excited to see ICA on mainnet and to be able to test it and try. I wish all the best for you guys.
Thank you very much, and it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Chop, chop, the wood we carry. Chop, chop, never meant to bury. Fire runs through the grain. Nothing lost, nothing to claim. Chop, chop, keep it moving. Chop, chop, always flowing around the night. Voices arise in the dark, truth survives.